Good morning. Today we look at Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 39. And these stories that we read today here are also in Mark's gospel. It's the first story is that Jesus goes up to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and way up north. And this woman comes, a Canaanite woman. And the Canaanites, they're, maybe a little better than the Samaritans, but maybe not, but they're Gentiles. This woman is, and Jesus is a Jew. And, for this woman to come and speak to Jesus again is surprising. And to begin with, she comes and it says, she starts shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." So she comes shouting. She doesn't come, asking. She comes shouting, trying to get his attention. I mean, why would Jesus listen to this? And it doesn't sound like he was in a crowd of people. He went away from that place to the district of Tyre and Sidon. A woman came out and started shouting. And so how did this woman, first of all, know who Jesus is? To see him and to recognize him, but Jesus' fame, I don't know if I should say fame, but the awareness of who Jesus is had spread around. All of the miracles he had done, how could it not be talked about? And in all of the far places. But for this woman to identify Jesus, to know who he was, but she shouts at him, and it says he did not answer her at all. Just ignored it. And the disciples said to him, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." And I didn't read this in Mark's gospel, but, she keeps badgering, she keeps shouting, and the disciples are upset by that. And then Jesus finally says, basically, it sounds like he's answering the disciples, not the woman. Because the disciples say, "Send her away," and Jesus answers, "I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." He says this, it reads like he says it to the disciples, but yet the woman was close enough as she heard. And then she comes and she kneels before him and says, "Lord, help me." Again, maybe not quite the shouting. Maybe it was shouting. It depends on how you read it. But when I read it, she was shouting to begin with, and when she comes and kneels before him, I always read this as more of a tender, "Lord, help me," rather than "Lord, help me," that way. And, and again, he answers her, it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. And, he's telling her that I'm sent to the lost sheep of Israel. I'm sent to the Jews, not to you, a Canaanite woman. And he likens her to a dog. You aren't, and dogs weren't worth much. They weren't family pets that got to sleep in the bed or got to lay on the carpet and got to be in. They were, dogs were scavengers. They were, nothing to be thought about too much that way. But so he likened her, he called her a dog, basically. And even this doesn't deter her. To have Jesus say to her, "You're not worthy. I didn't come for you." Maybe he didn't say you're not worthy, but real close to it. He said, "I didn't come for you." And her answer was about, the dog, not, didn't come for the dogs, but the dogs eat the scraps, the crumbs that fall from the master's table. They are sitting there waiting and watching. And we all know how that is. If you've got a dog or somebody's got a dog, they watch and they're ready, especially, the kids drop food pretty easily. Yeah, and sometimes they drop it willingly or intentionally. But, she says, but the dogs eat the scraps. I just need a little bit. I don't need all of you. I just need a little bit. And Jesus sees her faith. And it's, he responds to her faith. And that's what he says to her. "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish." Let it be done. He doesn't say any magic words. He says, "Let it be done." You know, who is Lord over heavens and earth and everything? Jesus Christ. So let it be done. And the woman's daughter was healed instantly. And, you know, whether they were, you know, maybe they weren't very far from this woman's house, because it says she came out and shouted at him. So she was close by anyway, but her daughter was healed. Jesus saw her faith. And this is the same it is today. I mean, we are saved by grace through faith. You know, it isn't that our faith is so strong and God says, oh, look at that man's faith, you know. No, it's that simple, we have that simple trust that God does what God says he will. And so we too are saved by faith, not by our acts, not by who we are or any of those great things that way, but simply by trusting and believing. And God calls us to that. And then Jesus leaves there, you know, so he traveled up to Tyre and Sidon, and then he leaves there and goes back to Galilee. And again, you know, Galilee there were a lot of Gentiles there, a lot of, you know, non-Jewish people. And this is, you know, Jesus was ministering in these areas where there were a lot of Gentiles, but yet there were Jewish synagogues in all of these places as well. So there was concentration of Jews, you know, every place that Jesus went. But he passes along the Sea of Galilee and went up the mountain where he sat down, and great crowds came to him with the maimed, the blind, the lame, the deaf, the dumb, and Jesus heals and cures them. It says they put them at his feet, and he cured them, so that the crowd was amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed whole, the lame walking, the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. And so again here, these people too had heard of Jesus. They brought all of those who needed this healing because they had faith that this Jesus who had been able to heal others, this Jesus who had given speech to others, had, you know, made the lame walk, the blind see, and all of that. You know, this was Jesus, and they praised God for the miracles that Jesus was able to do. And then we go on to this the last part of this chapter is that Jesus calls his disciples to him. You know, he's with this crowd of people that he has just healed, you know, all kinds of illnesses and stuff. And he says, I have compassion for them because they have been with me now for 3 days. And, you know, so we don't hear about that in all of the healing. You know, it's just, you know, they brought them and they healed them. You know, it sounds like it's boom. But 3 days that Jesus has been in this area with all of these people, curing and casting out demons and doing all of this God's work in the midst of these people. And he says, I do not want to send them away hungry, for they may faint on the way. And the disciples say, well, where are we going to get enough food for them? You know, we're in chapter 15 now. It was in chapter 14 that Jesus fed 5,000 people. He also, you know, we don't know how long it was between these two things, but the disciples didn't seem to remember that Jesus had just fed a little bit larger crowd with a similar amount of food. He had 5 loaves and 2 fish, and here they have 7 loaves and a few small fish. But Jesus blesses that food. You know, he says after giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowd, and all of them ate and were filled. And they took up 7 baskets full. When he fed the 5,000, they took up 12 baskets full. But again, it is an example for us of the generosity of God, how God takes care of the needs of the people. Jesus doesn't want to send them away hungry because he's afraid they may faint on their way home. They may not have the energy to get home. They've been listening for 3 days, and you know, there's no restaurants around to feed them. You know, we understand that, but they were there, and Jesus takes care of their needs, their physical needs of hunger, as well as their physical needs of healing. And then it says he sent the crowds away, and he got in the boat and went to the region of Magadan. But these miracles that Jesus does, I mean, this feeding of the 4,000 is just in Matthew and Mark. The feeding of the 5,000 is in all four Gospels. And it doesn't mean anything negative about the other Gospels, Luke and John, that don't have them, but it's a reminder for us that not each Gospel tells all of the same stories. But the stories are told for us to see the generosity of God, how God responds to the faith of the people. And it encourages our faith as well.